Wednesday, March 6th at noon Pacific Standard Time, and I have a very, very special guest today, Arenda Holladay. I'm going to be introducing her in just a second. And we have lots and lots of people on here already ready for this interview, and it's going to be very exciting. So I also have all of these questions that people have been asking of Arenda, and a few of me, mostly for Arenda. I will ask hers first, and she can do all of hers first, and we'll finish all that up and answer your individual questions that you post live. Then we'll go to the questions that are directed specifically to me for the knit along that we're doing. So we'll save those to the end. But I think you're really going to enjoy talking with Arenda, because I do. I love talking with Arenda. Arenda is the president of the Knitting Guild Association. I would say she's kind of the lifeblood of it. She has been through many, many, many years of seeing it through and seeing that it's successful and seeing that it stays its course of education for knitters. She's also the editor of Cast On magazine. So here you go. I'm going to let Arenda be seen. And she says, hi.
Hello.
Hello, Arenda. So I'm going to start right out by asking some of the questions people have posed for you, okay? This one is from Tessa A, and she says, I started the TKGA Basics course a long time ago. Life intervened, and she wants to know if she can start it back up again.
Absolutely. I never enforce deadlines because I do understand that life gets in the way. All you have to do is email me and I'll send you the updated materials and we'll just take off from wherever you were at. Not a problem at all.
Yay. I knew that would be your answer. You got to say it too. This is from Sarah Fran. She says, what was the source of the skill standards that are used in the TKGA courses?
Well, they've developed over time. When I first started the program back in probably 99, the standards were much laxer, primarily because there was not the internet. You couldn't look up how to do a technique. And if you didn't have a knitter who was around you, you had nobody to show. So we were pretty much thrilled if you could do something like a SSK. But as time has gone on and the internet has really changed the standards of knitting, and our goal is that items look handmade. And there's a lot of things that go into that. And so we reflect those standards. Our standards are higher than the industry in general in a lot of ways. I know that when we receive garments for cast on sometime, if they're not done by a master knitter, the finishing may not be exactly perfect. The tension may not be as good as we would expect. And we're aware that our standards are probably a little higher than the rest of the world.
Can you describe the difference between handmade and homemade?
Well, I know it when I see it. The thing is always bad. Oh, here's a tip. If you want to see, next time you're flipping through a knitting magazine, check for how the model is wearing her hair. Because if it's draped over to the side, probably the neckband isn't very good. Or if they're standing funny or they seem to be in an awkward position, it's because the garment could not be photographed properly. But finishing primarily is what I notice. And if it's not symmetrical, if you have a neckband and you haven't mirrored those increases or decreases, depending on whether you're going top or bottom, that's another big sign. Bad tension, it all works together, and it just takes one to make it look homemade.
So when I first, before I started the Master Handknitting Program, I actually only used knit two together. Did you know that?
Oh, yes. No, I did too. I lifted it off to one side. I'd look in the mirror and I'd go, there's something wrong here. And I wasn't sure what it was.
So this is another question for you. This is from Sherry C. She says, hi, Arenda. And her question's really good. She says, before TKGA became nonprofit and stopped a printed edition of Cast On, we had many guild members, not TKGA, but her own guild member community, who were members. Most stopped because they would not be receiving a magazine and are not very technologically literate. How would you describe the changes since the Guild has become a nonprofit organization that I can use to encourage people to be members again, even if they don't get a print magazine? And before you answer, I want to say that what I really like is the database that you can search it. So you can search, and I think when you're a member, you can search through everything. Even if you're just a member for that year, you have access to.
Oh yeah, you have access to everything. We were really sad that we had to give up the print magazine, but it was what drove TKGA to nearly being dissolved. The cost of doing a print magazine is just astronomical. In fact, in the last issue of Vogue, the editor of Vogue, letter of the editor was about that, how Vogue is raising their prices because of the cost of publication. If they are completely non-computer literate, it's going to be tough because we don't have a central office. Everything we do is via email and our website. And we feel bad about that, but it doesn't take that much skill to use our website. And like you mentioned, the index that we've established allows you to get into anything. It's our policy. I have all of the magazines going back to like 1987. And if a member asks me, sends an email to me or just the tkga.org in email, I will upload those things to our website. So if anybody sees a pattern or an article, the article is probably already there. But if they see something from a past issue, or they see it on Ravelry and it was in cast on, say in the 90s, I can probably get a copy of it on the website for them to get. And I don't know anybody else that offers that kind of accessibility to past issues.
The only online index I know of is Interweave Knits.
Yeah.
An online, which is extraordinarily difficult to find now. It used to be something prominent on their website, and they've kind of hidden it away now. But none of the other knitting magazines have online indexes where you can search the entire database. That's a huge plus.
It's a ton of work to maintain, but I took a couple of weeks and I set up a pretty extensive index for every technical article that we have.
Right.
Let's face it, that fashion changes. Patterns come and go. There are a few things that last forever, but when I got all of those articles from the magazines from the 1980s, I really had some good laughs over some of them. I mean, they really changed. That's why we didn't upload all of the patterns. But technical articles, they're there. A lot of your technical articles are still on our website. Well, not a lot of them, all of them, because we made sure that we're an educational organization. That's what's important for us to have out there.
Right. When I was working through the Master Handknitting Program, there are so many educational articles in magazines like Vogue Knitting.
Mm-hmm.
Meg Swanson has that educational article that she puts in there every issue, but there's no way to search them. The only way you can come across it is if you hit it accidentally by literally thumbing through every single magazine. And so I used the Interweave Knits Index a lot and found a lot of educational articles. So for me, because TKGA is education focused, because you have access to all the technical articles, that's huge. That's just huge for anybody who's going through the Master Handknitting Program, because much of that information is darn near impossible to find otherwise.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's an advantage. And I use it all the time, too. I mean, I'm always looking up past articles when I'm writing new ones.
Okay, here's another question. This is from Susan Maloney. And she says, Arenda, I have recently purchased a subscription for Cast On magazine with a thought of doing the master's program. What advice do you have for someone thinking of doing the master's program? And what would be a good place to start to get your feet wet if you don't want to jump straight in?
Well, first thing, I always tell anybody who's thinking of doing the master's program, the best thing you can do for yourself is to put your ego aside. The biggest problems that people will have when they do the program and they get their first review back is they're really disappointed not to get a letter that says, we have never seen a knitter as fine as you. And what are you doing? You're just magnificent. And everybody can improve. the things that I was critiqued on in my reviews are the things that are my strengths now. And that's the first thing. The second thing is to take the instructions very seriously and follow them. That will really help. Now, I hate to do advertisements, but a lot of people who think of doing the master's program take my basics class because it lets you get your feet wet about having your work critiqued. But it is a cost. And so I hesitate to say, oh, you have to take this and it will make your job easier. But if you're nervous about having your work reviewed, if that's the issue, that's a good place to start. Otherwise, if that's not an issue, just start in. It's tiered so that you can grow with the program. And so some people wind up taking some preliminary classes, others don't.
Okay, I have another question for you. This is from MSB. I do believe she's a master knitter. Her question is, would you comment on the various correspondence courses offered by TKGA? That's a big question.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. They fall into two categories. There's the certification programs like the master's program, the judges program, and tech editing. And we're in the process of developing another one called professional knitters. And it's for people who do not want to go to the master's program, but want to become a test knitter or sample knitter, work in the industry that way. The correspondence courses are ones that are educational primarily. One of the most popular ones is Binka Schwann's Taming Tension. And so many knitters have, well, they're not even aware they have a tension issue until it's pointed out to them. I teach 3 or 4, one, the basics class.
That's pretty popular.
Yeah, it's pretty popular. Yeah. And it is, like I say, a lot of people will take it to just figure out if they want to do the master's program. And it is a good way because the master's program isn't for everybody.
Can I ask you, some people are having a hard time hearing you, so you may just need to scoot up to your iPad a little bit closer.
Oh, you're going to be so sorry. You asked.
So we'll wait and see if that is better. Let me see. Okay, so I'll get feedback. Okay. So did you have more to say on that topic? I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, pretty much I'm done, but you can see our complete list of courses if you go to our website and see what we've got. We've got lengthy ones that are multi-part and then some mini courses that are just very single topic and doesn't take that long to get through them.
Okay, here's another question from MSB. She says, since TKGA instructors and board members are volunteers, how does TKGA recruit and train such talented master hand knitters from across the country?
We really don't recruit. To join the committee, and we've pretty much, our bylaws are set that in order to be a board member, you have to be a master knitter. You need to understand the program, and that's the best way to do it. When someone graduates from the program, if their co-chairs and the people reviewing their work have recommended them, then we will consider asking them to join the committee. Their work has to be absolutely exceptional. And they also have to have the desire to pass on what they've learned. They have to have enough time to do the reviews, which is a big issue. And they have to be able to play well with others. It is a committee, and an important part of it is the ability to get along with other people and to function as a committee. And we've been very lucky with that. That's one reason why, well, that is really the major reason that the organization continues to survive, because we are all completely committed to making the organization a success, and we all devote lots and lots of hours to it.
When you say their work needs to be exceptional, it's not just the knitting, right? It's
no,
writing
and the knitting. It's the writing, it's the understanding, it's the ability to transmit that information to another person. Because we're an educational organization. There are a lot of wonderful knitters out there that don't have the desire or the ability to really share what they want, what they know. They just want to work and create beautiful things, and that's very valid. It's a different kind of person who wants to teach or let that information out there. And that comes through, you would be surprised, in their writing and in their presentation of their works.
Okay, another question. This is from Susan Marie.
Oh, hi.
Yes, and she says, Arenda and Suzanne, what are your opinions about doing stranded color work with a mixture of heathered and non-heathered yarns?
Well, for me, anytime something is different, I wonder why it's different. So it would depend on how she wants to do it. If I were designing it, I might have all heathered for the background and then solid for the motifs, because it's just human nature. When you see something that's different, you look at it and you wonder, why is that? Is that more important? Is that why that is there? It attracts your eye more. But other than that, it kind of depends. Heathered yarn can be really heathered and look completely different, or fairly clear. I'd have to see the yarn.
Right. So I'm going to give my opinion, which is very different. I like heathered yarns, and I don't really differentiate between heathered and non-heathered. I just look at the overall effect of what it's going to do in my knitting. But mostly when I'm doing it, I'm thinking more of Fair Isle versus stranded. And so in Fair Isle, I like the colors to blend from one to another. And sometimes the heathered yarn will provide the blend for me when another yarn is too distinctly different.
Yeah.
But the only thing is you cannot use heathered yarns in the Master Handknitting Program.
No. And, again, I think any kind of color work is impossible to tell what it's going to look like unless you work up a swatch. You just never really know. I mean, you can predict and think that it's going to look one way, and once you work your swatch, you're probably going to have to readjust anyway.
Yeah. And so it's personal preference. It comes down to that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so this is from a lady named Katarina Knits Too. She says, Arenda and Suzanne, please could you discuss about stranded versus slip stitch method differences, advantages, and limitations? That's a tough question.
Well, I rarely use slip stitch knitting. I prefer Fair Isle or stranded, because you can get much more detail in the final product. And also the texture of most slip stitch patterns is going to be heavier, because when you slip that stitch, it's going to bunch it up. Your row gauge is going to be so different. I always think that, you can do garments out of it, but I think of it more as an accessory sort of thing. I mean, you've done some beautiful mosaic design. It's just not my favorite, so I'm going to go with it.
Right. And again, that's personal preference. So I like stranded and mosaic because it does give you that texture. I especially like doing mosaic with a strand, net background, and the garter stitch for the motif. It just gives this really rich look. So again, the answer is personal preference. And in the knit along that I'm currently doing, people can use stranded in the yoke, also mosaic, and really you can steek both too. You could steek mosaic just as you steek stranded. So I don't know that there's advantages or disadvantages. I think it's just personal preference. Oops, we lost you for a second, Arenda. We went back to your motif.
Oh yeah, hold on. My husband was calling me.
Oh, okay. Tell him not to do that.
Hold on. There we go.
You're back. Okay, this is from Susan Maloney again. She says, Arenda, could you please explain the tech editor course? Should you do the master knitter course first? I do a lot of test knitting. How is a tech editor different?
Well, our tech editing.
Whoops.
He's doing it again.
He's
sorry about that.
That's okay. We're patient.
Okay. Our tech editor, Susan Levering, does the certification program. And I think the primary difference between a test knitter and a tech editor is a tech editor doesn't knit the garment. They just look at the pattern and make the adjustments there. They also have to have a pretty good grasp of proper grammar and I know that Sharon focuses on that. You can send Sharon a Ravelry message. Her Ravelry name is Sharon L, and she can give you much more specifics about the course. I am the worst tech editor on the planet. I can't find a mistake if it bites me on the ankle. So I leave that completely up to Sharon. She is a fabulous tech editor, and I know her students are quite pleased by her work. I have always said, and I know you've heard me say this before about Sharon, you know the expression, you can't see the forest for the trees. Sharon not only doesn't see the forest, she doesn't see the trees. She is looking at the leaves. There is no mistake that is going to get by her. And you will certainly have a good idea of what is involved in the job of being a tech editor if you take the class. But contact her on Ravelry. She'll be happy to give you all the details you need.
Right. And so I would add that for a tech editor, they're looking at all of the pattern, like for all the sizes,
Yeah,
all the variations, rather than just the one that the test knitter is knitting.
yeah.
And I'll tell you, this is just a pet peeve of mine. But when I have somebody test knit for me, I just want them to test knit.
Yeah.
I don't want them to edit my pattern, because
look at the
editing the pattern is a completely different thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. I have one more question for you from the written questions. This is from Emma now. Amanda now. She's from France, and French is her primary language. She has 3 questions. She said, I know the Master Hand Knitter is open to non-American people, but my English is really basic. So do you think this can be an obstacle? Both reading and writing in English are required, and I really think I cannot write at a good level. Then her second question is, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do the program only in English because we're volunteers, and asking for people that can review, we would need at least 4 people fluent in any language in order to do the review. It's not a PhD program. We don't expect the writing to be at a university level. It's just important, particularly for non-US people doing it, that they put information in their own words. We just have to be able to understand what you're telling us. In some countries where plagiarism is not stressed as much as here, we cannot accept information that is directly copied from any source. And that has caused some problems in the past. But by level 1, we should be able to figure out if we can. We just have to be able to understand what you're trying to tell us. So if you have a friend who speaks English or reads English, it would be good to have them look at it and kind of polish it a bit.
So she, in her next question, she says, what are the clues to know if one should take basics before? And that is a good one, because you would be able to tell them, because you're the instructor for basics.
Yes, you should be, by the time you get to the basics class, I expect when you take the class, you should be able to knit and purl, work ribbing. You should be able to do simple cables and simple lace. And that's basically all I'm requiring.
Do you ask any questions in that course that they have to answer?
Yes, but they're very, very, very basic. They're simple sentences.
And then she says her third question is, can you explain for non-English, what does references mean? It
means it can be an internet source. It can be where you're getting your information from.
Right.
Whether it's a book. And I'm afraid the books will have to be in English because, again, the reviewers check all of the references. They have to be able to have access to the book or to the website to see where you got your information from. So that's all we mean by references.
Okay.
And Grandma taught me in 4th grade is not a reference.
Okay, that's all of the pre-written ones. Let me check through now. To see if anybody's, and remember, for those who are submitting questions online, please put the word question. I should have told you this. Let me put me over here for a second. I'm going to go down the list now and look at the questions people submitted for Arenda. So what I would like you to do is, if you didn't already, put your question mark, put your question, write question in all capital letters, but it might be too late for that. But I'm going to look down now and see what I can find. So, and I see lots of people on here that, Anne Tremolio is from France. She's the one that asked the question, Arenda, about taking the master knitting class when your English isn't so good. She's very good. She does a lot of translating for me on my videos.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, let me look for some questions here. Everybody's saying hello. They're from all over the world. There's so many. So fun to see these people.
Turkey.
Francois, Kathy. Yay. And people are saying hello, Arenda. So a lot of people are saying hi. Some people are having problems with the sound, but I think that's unavoidable today, and I'm sorry for that.
George.
Okay. And Dolise, she said, my question was for both of you. Dolise, what was your question? I don't remember. Oh, number 69. She's so smart. Okay, let me see. Number 69 on here. Oh, she says, question, what style of 9 stitch steek would you use for the 2 fronts of a V-neck vest that's worked flat with air and weight yarn? So it's color work 2 colors. So first of all, if I'm knitting something flat, I don't usually put a steek in it. I just knit back and forth. I think Arenda does the same thing. In stranded knitting or Fair Isle, you can work it flat, and there you don't need any steeks. But if you're working the front all in one piece with the V-neck being steeked, it depends on the size of your yarn. If you're working with fingering weight yarn, I like the steek to be about 1 inch wide. Let's put it that way. Okay, so it just depends on how many stitches you're getting per inch, because if you're working with bulkier yarn, you don't want a great big humongous steek. And if you are working with really bulky yarn, you may want to use the sewing machine method to reinforce your steek before you sew it. And as I showed on the live stream on Sunday, I have those 2 sweaters that I knit for my husband that I didn't even know about steeking at the time at all. And I literally sewed it down with the sewing machine and cut it open. And they've been good for 20 years without falling apart. So Dolise, am I answering your question? Or Arenda, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do not have opinions on steeks.
I know.
Not do steeks.
Arenda doesn't do steeks. She'd prefer to knit Fair Isle flat than do the steeks. So, and she's an expert at it. So, okay. And I think I answered the question, what kind of steek reinforcement is your recommendation for air and weight wool, such as Noro Kurian? I would use the sewing machine, because the stitches are so big that if you used the crochet method of reinforcing them, you'd be adding so much more yarn and so much more bulk to it that it just really wouldn't be very pleasing when you're finished. Okay, let me look down. I think that's all of the questions that I've seen for Arenda. Let me look, double check here. Does anybody else? Oh, Pamela Matthews says, question. Here, she's got the same as me, Arenda. I love it. She says, Arenda, if you could only have 1 or 2 reference books, what would they be?
Well, the standard ones. But my favorite book, other than the standard ones, is The Big Book of Knitting by Katarina. I actually keep it in the bathroom.
Yeah,
it's just wonderful.
Here, I'm going to pull it out of my library here so I can show it.
I don't think it's in print anymore, but you can get used copies, I bet, on Amazon for not much.
Yes, I'll have to find it here. It's not popping right out at me. I've got it right next to me somewhere. And then I have a question. I have a couple questions for you, Arenda. One is, why did you decide to do the Master Hand Knitting Program to begin with?
I was what you call someone who knit a lot, and I was completely self-taught, and I just wanted to improve my skills. We had moved to Kentucky from Washington, D.C. There it is. And I wasn't going to be able to do the work that I had been doing in D.C., and so I had the time. And the biggest problem with my knitting, I always was a pretty good knitter, I mean, the quality of the work, but I was the worst finisher in the world. I mean, I would give a present and I would have to tell them how to wear it. Okay, you always want to have the hat to the back so that you don't see. I mean, it was really the worst finisher.
Oops.
And so that was why I did it. I just wanted to be able to give a present to someone and not have to explain how to wear it. So mission accomplished.
Okay, this is the book that Arenda, let me get myself over here. I've got two computers going here. This is the book that Arenda was talking about. And you can see I bought this used. This is one of my all-time favorite books.
Yeah,
too.
it's just a great book.
It's just, she has different things in here that you don't
find anywhere else.
And I think she's British, so she uses different terms, but she has all these, it's all about knitting. There aren't any patterns in here. It's just a reference book. But back in the back, she has some just beautiful stitch patterns where, here we go, that you don't
see anywhere
else. Exactly. I don't know where she got these. It's just stitch patterns. It's not a very big part of the book, but the patterns are just beautiful. And after you've looked through, quite a few stitch dictionaries, you start to understand that there's just a certain amount of designs, and you see them over and over and over.
Yeah. It's just a lovely book.
Yes. I have another question for you. Who, author or reference or whatever, has been the most influence on you?
Well, I hate to admit it, but I really didn't know many knitters and I didn't read many books. I have always done crafts just to occupy myself and keep myself busy. And my greatest influence was probably my mother, who never gave a present that she did not make. I don't think I ever saw her buy anything. And she was primarily a crocheter and a quilter. And I was just inspired by the dedication that she put into her work. And that's probably why I picked knitting instead of quilting. I just wanted to reach the same kind of excellence that I saw in her work. Although she had appalling taste in yarn.
That's awesome. So now people have put some more questions on here.
Okay.
This is from Kathy Trakowska. She is from Australia, where they had blistering heat just a few weeks ago. She says, Arenda, I am interested to know your preferred knitting style. Are you a thrower, flicker, continental knitter, or other?
I'm an other. I knit in a way that in the first book, The Principles of Knitting, June Hemmons Hyatt said, if anybody offers to teach you to knit the way that I knit, you decline politely and run in the opposite direction. That's pretty much a direct quote. I'm a thrower, but I hold my needle in my, like a pencil. I balance it between my thumb and my forefinger. And if you go to my blog, because so many people would ask me how I knit, I did a video showing how I knit. It's the advantage. I've been told it's from the Yorkshire region of England, which that may or may not be true, but you can knit very fast and with really even tension because you're not altering how you tension the yarn from knit to pearls. So if you go to my blog, which I think it's arendaholladay.com, go to the index and look for how I knit, and you can see how I knit.
I saw a video recently, probably in the last year, of a technique called Peruvian knitting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly how you knit.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
Well, it's, I love old crime shows. And if you ever look at the Miss Marples, every single Miss Marple that's been on television knits the way I do.
There you go. That's cool. Okay, so here's some more. This is from Dolores Cowie. She says, question, generally, how much time is allotted for the Master Handknitting Program?
There's no time limit. There have been people that bought the program back in the 2000s that are still working on it. We don't enforce a time limit, but because the price of the Master's program is pretty much derived from postage costs, if you don't complete it within, I think it's maybe a year and a half for level 2, maybe 2 years for level 3. Don't quote me on that, please. Look it up. You will have to purchase updated instructions, and that helps compensate for the change in postage from the time you ordered the program to when you're sending your materials in. because we have to ship those boxes all over the country. So I would say that 90% of the cost of the program covers postage reimbursement, and that's pretty much it.
Yes. So this is another question. This is from Bonnie Davis. She says, Arenda, could you tell us a bit about the judges certification course, the knitting judges certification course?
There's a certification course for judges. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge. Look on the website. It has more information in there. Suzanne taught it until she became so busy. And now we have Susan is doing, Susan Lambert. And you can contact her. If you go to the Ravelry forum on TKGA, she's listed there and you can ask her specifically.
Yes, she's called, I think she's Susan Lamb.
Yeah, Susan Lamb is what her.
Yeah. Okay, this is from Scott Tigner, and he just finished level 2. So he's thinking about his Fair Isle sweater that he wants to do for his final thing for the level 3. And he says, in designing my level 3 sweater, is it acceptable to adapt modern motifs for Fair Isle stranded sweater, or must they be traditional motifs?
Oh, the motifs can be whatever you want. It's primarily, when we say traditional, it's more to the structure of the sweater and the process of making it. We've had people use, one of our committee members, I think, had chemistry symbols on her hat. So we don't care what the motif is. It can be meaningful to you.
It's the method, not the motif.
Yeah, and actually, it's more fun to review a sweater when there's some personality of the knitter in it.
Yes. What I did on mine is I like roses, and the peace rose is my favorite. And so I chose the colors from the peace rose. And then I found actually a motif that was for crocheting, filet crochet. Yeah. And translated into a stranded. So this is from Marlene Kern. She says, where can one access the list of classes?
It's under, I'd have to look at the website because I have a memory this big. It's under resources, I believe. And the courses are all listed there.
Just go to the website. Yeah.
Just go to the website and scroll through, but I think it's under member resources.
Yeah. So this is from Joan Wilk, and this is a very good question. She says, could you both discuss the research needed or that you did for the Master Knitting Program? I'm going to answer it first, and you can answer it. I think that it's as little or as much as you want it to be. Each person does their own. For me, I jumped in with both feet. Other people will skim the surface, just so long as you fulfill the requirements of what the committee is asking of you. But there's no specific amount of research that you need to do. Okay.
No, and you're doing the research for yourself.
Right.
And primarily the reason why we have you do research is because there might be a better way to do it than you know. And so we do ask for 2 references for most topics, but you can do as much research as you like. There just wasn't that much available when I did the program. You had Vogue, Principles of Knitting, and the Reader's Digest Knitter's Handbook, and that was pretty much it. There's just so much more available now. But I find myself, whenever I'm doing a project, I try and do something new in a project, because how else am I going to learn? Too many knitters get kind of bogged down in what they know. I know how to do this, so I'm going to do it this way. And what that forces me to do, I'll say, okay, in this one, I'm doing this type of short rows that I may not use all the time. So then I'll research it. And guess what? I've learned something new, and I may have learned that I don't ever want to do that again, which is as valuable.
I do the same thing. I very rarely knit something unless it has something exciting about it that I want to learn. Yeah. That's what draws me to knitting new things. Okay, another question. This is from Dolise Beeman. She said, Arenda, when did you start the TKGA course? What year?
I think it was in 1996, because that was the year that I moved to Kentucky. And I took a year for each level. And why I did that is I wanted to incorporate what I had learned in that level. So, and also give me a chance to think about what I was going to want to do in the next level. And I do recommend what we find a lot of knitters do is they'll do just enough to pass a level, and then they go to the next level, and it's like they forgot everything that they learned in the previous level. Their tension's not very good. They're not paying attention to detail. So make sure, you know, that you have made part of your knitting what you've learned before going.
Right. Practice it in between.
Yeah.
Practice. So here's another question. This is from, well, actually 3 people in a row on here mentioned now that they knit just like you, Arenda. 2 of them,
good.
2 are from Australia, and 1 is from England. Now, Carol Corcoran asked, is your style of knitting like lever knitting?
It's similar. And in fact, when I first started knitting, I used very long straight needles, and I would frequently, I realize now, use them like a lever. But I stopped doing that because, and I shouldn't even tell people this, I put my long needle on my lap and I kind of had it in my mouth, and I punctured the roof of my mouth with it. That's when I stopped using long needles, switched to shorter ones.
Yeah. So another lady, Michelle Forbes, added some information here. She says, it's called parlor knitting. This technique was developed by the Victorians as a more elegant form of knitting than typical throwing.
Well, you know, and I've heard that before, but I wonder, the chief advantage that I see of the way I knit is you can knit very fast. I'm usually the fastest knitter in any group I'm sitting with. And it always made me wonder if it wasn't used somehow for production knitting, because it is really a fast way to knit.
Okay, one more question. Dolores Cowie, how would we know whether a color is too dark for the master hand knitting samples? Do you suggest sticking with white and pastels?
Yes. If you have to ask yourself if it's too dark, it's too dark. I mean, if there's any question in your mind, it is too dark. And the reason we want light colored yarn is because it's easier to see mistakes. And also, the people that are reviewing your swatches are looking at it stitch by stitch. And if it's a dark color yarn, that's just, it's very hard on the eyes. And you don't need to pick a color that is enjoyable to knit with. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to use cashmere for this. I mean, honest to God, no, you want a yarn that's going to give you the best results. And it's not going to impress anybody if you use a fancy yarn. I always recommend Lion Brand Fisherman Wool.
Yeah, or patents.
Those are the best. And if you make mistakes, you can knit a, you know, it's not expensive yarn. Don't invest a lot of money, but do make it light colored. Pastels are really nice.
Yeah, I liked I did a lot of mine in the Lion Brand's Fisherman's Wool, the off-white one. And I'll tell you, Susan Lambert, had the opportunity of reviewing her level 3. She did her Aran sweater with that, and it was the nicest knitting I've ever seen in my life.
It really gives good results for
Aran, the Lion's Brand Aran wool, Fisherman's wool, yes.
And I was just in a craft store, and I think it was $12 for a bazillion yarns.
Yeah, huge thing. Okay, so that's all the questions that I have for you, Arenda. Is there anything else that you would like to say?
No, it's just been a lot of fun.
It is fun,
isn't it? I am really easy to find. My email is all over the place out there, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody about the Master Handknitting Program. And if you're a designer, submit to Cast On.
Yes. Are you going to the Dallas, Fort Worth, or whatever?
Yes.
So if people are going there, they can say hi to you, right?
Yes. We're doing the Master's Day again, and I'm going to be there through Friday because I have to be back for our photo shoot for Cast On the Sunday. But
now that some more questions popped up. They know where I'm going to let you go, so they're going, oh, we got to catch her. Okay, so this is from Carol Corcoran again. She says, question, how can one improve their tension?
Well, you first have to figure out what the problem is. And, you know, and tension is not really, you know, people will ask me, I have naturally good tension because of the way I knit. And so it's hard for me to figure out what people are doing wrong. Suzanne actually has the best videos I've ever seen on improving your tension on your blog.
Yeah.
Finesse.
Right.
Yeah, that I refer my basic students to you all the time. But the first step is to figure out where your mistake is.
Yes. And be able to see it. The first step is to see that there's a problem.
Yes. Figure out how to fix it. And the thing that I notice that a lot of people do when they try and fix it is they'll, on one swatch, try 17 different fixes. And you can't do that. You need to do one swatch with one fix, another swatch, label them, and then compare.
And block them.
Well, oh, yes, of course. Blocking, really.
You can't really tell. Yeah. So this is another question from, or a comment from Deborah Cisneros. She says, comment, there's a tribe of Northwest Native Americans who have been knitting your style for many years and their work is very well known.
Oh, good.
Interesting. Yes. Be nice to know the name of the tribe. April Stevens question, I love your YouTube videos. Do you have a large stash or buy yarn for projects?
I have a large stash and I buy yarn for projects. So that's why I have a large stash. But my New Year's resolution this year was to use up my stash. So get back to me in a year. I think I probably have enough sock yarn to knit everybody I know a pair of socks for every month of the year.
So when I first retired, I went and I visited Arenda. And she lives in a multi-story house. It's absolutely gorgeous. And she keeps her stash down in the basement. and there's a door down there. And she just told me, do not open that door. And I didn't. I never opened the door. But I suspected that there was yarn in there.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of yarn. But what I do is if I run across a new knitter, somebody who's young in particular, and they tell me that they're interested in learning how to knit, I destash that way.
Okay, now here's one from Vera Van Syke, and I like this question because I'd like to know the same thing. Question, when will you, TKGA, come to Charleston, South Carolina again?
We would love to. Part of the problem for us putting on courses is that it requires a lot of manpower and work. And we're growing slowly. We recently added a board member who is going to work on offsite education. But what we do not want to do is to squander our members' money. We are very, very cognizant of the fact that we are spending other people's money. And it would be really fun to put on conferences all over. But there are so many conferences and fiber festivals that the competition is so fierce. And so people will say they want us to come, you go to all the work, and then you lose money, and that's not our money to lose. So we're very, very careful about committing to do things.
Okay, this is from David Hensley. He says, can Arenda show us all, tell us all about the sweater she's wearing?
Oh, this is one, I did a series of sweaters for cast on when it was print using Redfish Dye Works yarn, which is a lace weight actually. And this one is summer. And it's, my husband likes to fly fish. And so it's summer nights near a place where he fish. And it has little trout. Let's see if I can get them. Can you see the trout? And I love working with their yarn, and I love doing stranded work where you can express an interest of yours, make it yours personally.
And how many stitches to the inch do you have on that sweater?
It's about 11.
Yeah, and what's the size of the yarn?
It's lace and size 0 needles.
And there's no steeks in that sweater, right?
No, I don't do steeks. I get better stranded tension when I work flat. Okay. Because you can flip it over and you see if your strands are too tight.
Exactly. I have, and you know, catching the floats on the wrong side is no big deal. You just reverse what you do on the right side.
No, not a big deal.
It's no big deal.
No.
Okay, I don't see any more questions again, and it's been 49 minutes since we started. So I appreciate you participating in this tremendously, Arenda.
Oh, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to let you go, and I have some other questions I'm going to answer about the knit along that we're doing that people asking. So
thanks. Bye-bye.
It's very, very fun. Thank you. Okay, that was fun, wasn't it? Oh my gosh, I love Arenda. Okay, I have questions. Whoops. Let me adjust my microphone again here. I'm sorry that her volume wasn't up as much as you would have liked. I will address that in the future when we do our testing again. Maybe a little microphone would have helped, but at the time we were testing, the volume didn't seem to be a problem. So that's something that I will work on in the future. Okay. So I do have some questions from people about the knit along, and there's some very good questions. This one is from Jane Socks. She says, I have Ann Budd's book. Her yarn requirements chart page 33 has stitch count of 3 to 7. So what her question is that her stitch gauge is greater than 7 stitches to the inch, and she's wanting to know how to proceed. I am going to have a video on that. I have another video similar to that for the ITAG cardigan, but I'm going to make a new one for the ITAG yoke. On how to deal with sizes that are outside of the range. You know, if your chest circumference is smaller than what she has or larger, it'll be how to deal with that, and also how to use stitch counts that are not included in her book. You can still use her book. It's just a different method of using it. So I will cover that. Okay, let me make sure. I'd like to do fair or stranded pattern in the yoke, but have a large bust. I think a circular yoke design might make me look like a shelf. Can you give some pointers as to what sort of yoke design would be better for me? That's another good question. So the part that's going to come out this Friday, part of the handout that's coming out this Friday is addressing that in the fact of where you place your design in your yoke. So you can have a yoke that is has just the design up here. Do you remember in the 50s and 60s when those little cute little shell sweaters, or they actually had little short sleeve sweaters, and they had just a yoke right on the front? There was nothing on the back. Do any of you remember those? So that's just a yoke around the neck. You can do that, but going all the way around. So it's just right up here and not extending into your bust, or you could make it up here. And actually that draws the eyes up above the bust instead of drawing them to the bust. Then the rest of the yoke would just be your background yardage. And so you wouldn't really even see that it's a yoke. It would just be part of your sweater. I hope that answers that. I love answering these kinds of questions because it makes me think. It's like Arenda said, you know, she likes to knit things that challenge her. This challenges me and makes me think, and I absolutely love it. Okay, this is Knitting It again. She has two questions. One about the splice steeks and one about chart measurements, ABC versus schematic diagram labels. Question 1. I just watched your off-the-cuff number 2, and you mentioned spit splicing yarns over the steeked stitches. Please explain, demonstrate this. That's a video. I will have to make a video to do that because I can't really get up close enough to show you here, and I don't have my supplies here to do that. But I'm going to add that to my video list right now in my bullet journal. Yay, bullet journal. Okay, question 2. I'm having trouble transferring some of the measurements that you asked us to take, i.e. A, B, and C with Amanda and Perrin, etc., and where some of them fit on the diagram. Is there an easy way to correlate the ABC chart measurements with labeled dimensions on the diagram? How about the chart measurements text and the schematic labels changed to the same text descriptor? I need more information from you on that, and I am going to look at that. That's one of the things that I'm looking at that will probably be updated when the new information comes out this Friday. I did review this. There are some words that I can change that make it more transferable. But some of the information is going to be explained later on as we go, when we go to use that information. For example, on the schematic, it has the arm length down here, right? And there's nowhere where we measured the arm length, is there? There's the yoke, and she doesn't really give you a way of measuring the yoke depth. So I'm using the armhole depth for the yoke because the yoke typically comes to the armpit. It's just like when we did the raglan sweaters. Remember, we made our increases right down to the armpit, then stop. The rest of the sweater goes down straight. Yokes are the same way. The yoke extends to the armpit, not into it, but to it. And so it will come down this far this way, but because it's a circle, that means it's going to dip down lower in the front and come back over here. You could measure directly from your sweater here to here and here to here, but I gave you some other clues on how to use that in the handout that's going to be coming out this Friday. Okay, let me move to the next one. This is from Sherry C. And she says, Suzanne, I watched your video and read the print materials for doing stranded knit steeks. As you do, I pick up the band stitches in the space between the body of the sweater and the adjoining steek stitch. In a recent workshop, the presenter suggested that we pick up the stitches in the middle of the steek stitch adjacent to the body of the sweater. She thought that the stitch was more stable than the space between the stitches, especially if it was stranded. Okay, so if you have two stitches next to each other right here, correct? And you pick up between the two of them. What's the difference between that and having stitches like this and picking up in the middle of the V? See, here's the V. There is no difference, okay? Because right side up, you have two V's. You turn it, the work the other way, you have two upside down V's, and you would be picking up in the center of that V, right? There's no difference. One is not superior to the other. It's just personal preference. And I don't like having half a V along the edge of my work. I don't have any stranded knitting in here. Oh, yes, I do. So on here, here's my steek, right? If I picked up in the middle of the yellow, instead of between the yellow and the design, I would have half of a yellow stitch all the way down. And I call those orphan stitches, orphan half a stitch. I don't like that. I like to have a whole V between. And so it would make a half a V. It would give you orphan stitches on your edge. That's my personal opinion. Okay, everything that I say is my personal opinion, but it is based on lots and lots and lots of experience and research. Okay, next one. Let me see here. This is from Nona Joan. She says, I'll be knitting a pullover sweater in the ITAG Yoke knit along. I'm getting ready to swatch and realize you said to cast on enough stitches to have 6 inches of stitches on the needles before joining in the round. I understand that I should use the same needles for swatching as I do for knitting. 6 inches of stitches on a circular cable will require a very small cord, which I don't have. Would magic loop be the only solution? You can use magic loop or 2 24-inch circular needles. Now, let's say you have interchangeable needles. This leads into an excellent question here. Let's say you have interchangeable needles and you only have 2 size 6. Let's say you're going to use size 6 and you only have 2 size 6 tips, right? But you've got 2 size 5s, so you can use 2 cords from your interchangeable set, put the 6 on the leading edge of each one, the 5 on the following edge. And then when you're knitting, you knit from a 5 from the 6 off of the 5. So the 5 is your leading stitches, but you knit onto the 6, which creates the size of the stitch. This is also a really good method for people to use who have really tight knitting and they have a hard time moving their stitches along. If you use interchangeable needles and put a needle that's 1 size smaller on the left end of the needle and the size you want to make the stitches to be on the right, they'll slide easier on the left needle and your knitting will go faster. You'll spend less time trying to shove the stitches across. Okay. This is from Dolise. Oh, we answered that. Okay. This is from EH2O. Please discuss appropriate fibers for the ITAG Yoke sweater, especially non-wools, plant-based, cotton, linen, rayon, etc., and silk, including steeking. Are these advisable or not? You can use any of those. I wouldn't particularly use rayon. It's too slippery. But you could. It's just not, rayon's not one of the things that I'm attracted to, but other people really like it a lot. You could use rayon. You can use any plant-based fiber. You can use plant-based fibers mixed with other fibers, like you can mix linen and silk, cotton and silk. Though there's some really nice linen and silk and cotton and silk mixtures that are just lovely. You can steek them. I wouldn't try steeking rayon. And silk could be a little slippery, but if the silk is mixed with the cotton or the linen, most likely you could steek it, but you would use the sewing machine method to do it. This is from Dynasty. Suzanne, my sweater is an intarsia pullover, so I'm going to be working intarsia in the round. How fun! It's exciting! I've watched your video on intarsia cables in the round, but I'm not sure if it will work over so many stitches rather than just a couple of cable legs. I'm going to make a video on intarsia in the round, so just wait for that. It'll come. This is a really intense period this week and the next 2 weeks because we're creating our yokes. So I'm going to be putting out tons of information, and then I get to rest for 2 weeks while you knit. Okay. But that's one of the things that's going to be there. And I get to check it off my video to-do list because intarsia in the round has been on my video to-do list for a long time. So I'm going to be happy with that. This is from Veronica, 52. I've been putting my body measurements to this. This is another question about her body measurements aren't mentioned in Ann Bud's book. And I am going to address that in a video. And let's see some more here. We're moving right along. This is from Margaret, 73. She says, would you consider a knit along just for swatching? How fun. That would be fun. I've never thought about that, but I think it's a grand idea. I always enjoy seeing the piles of swatches you have for different reasons. I love the sweater knit along because I'll end up with exactly what I want eventually, but I'm not patient enough to go through the whole sweater and finish it to find out, oh, I really needed to swatch for XYZ after the fact. The list I can make in my head of what to swatch for is growing by the minute, and I could be swatching for a year and not make a decision. A swatch class would help me a lot without the pressure of a finished project. Your swatch videos of cables and cable flare are wonderful. They go into details of all the things to look for when swatching. I did not know cable flare existed until it was discussed. I'm also remembering a video with a stack of different increases. I would love to have a binder with all these types of things in it at the end of a knit along. Is there a book that would take me through this? Or perhaps the Master Knitter program does. Because I can do anything I want, I am considering everything in existence and getting nowhere making a decision. The Master Handknitting Program is really good. And you could do that. That's a wonderful choice. Another thing is that I am actually developing, I actually have a course that I've been teaching for several years here locally, and it's very, very popular, and I call it Boot Camp. Knitting Boot Camp 1 and Knitting Boot Camp 2. They are both 10-week courses, and I am in the process of transferring them into being a correspondence course. I have one person who's testing it for me right now, and I have some more materials to add. So that's one of the reasons I'm taking the whole summer off this year, because I'm going to beef up those programs, and they are going to be something that you can order and receive from me and work through in covering all those things that you were talking about in the swatches. But a swatch knit along would be fun too. I could totally get into that. I'm totally in love with doing swatches. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else on here that I have missed. Let's see. Everyone enjoyed Arenda, didn't they? I just love her so much. It's very, very fun. I could talk with her all day long forever. Carol Corcoran, question, what is your opinion on steek knitting? Do you know what I'm asking? I don't know what you're asking. There's different ways to knit steeks, if that's what you're talking about. And I'm going into that for the information that comes out this Friday. There's also a Uni Yang, EUNNYJANG, and there'll be a link to it in the handout. It has a blog that she used to do, and she has a whole series on, it's called the Steeking Chronicles. I highly recommend that. It's really educational. She also has one about lace. It's equally educational. I liked both of those and learned tons from them. So they're worth looking at about steeking if you're interested. And then Judy Kruger asked about, but she retracted her message, but she's really concerned about how to figure out how much yarn to get without having a swatch in advance. So what she wants to do is order all of the yarn at one time. I really don't know how to do that. You can guess what your stitch gauge is going to be, and then you would use the yardage calculator in Ann Budd's book. For example, if you're using worsted weight yarn and you're using a US 7 needle, you should expect to get about 5 stitches to the inch. If you go to the if you go to the Craft Yarn Council, they have the standards there, and they tell you for each weight of yarn, the sizes of needles that you should use and the expected gauge you should get. So if you really don't know about the gauge to expect, you can go there and it'll give you a starting point. And then you can use that, do your chest circumference and add your ease, and then go to Ann Budd's book, page 33, to figure out your yarn, how much yarn you need to order. That's a difficult situation to be in. Okay. Anne, excuse me, I need a drink of water. Anne Tremolier's question: if for the yoke, if I want a large neck, must I start the cast on as if I was some row after Ann Budd's model? Yes, that's all written out in the upcoming instructions. I tell you exactly how you can figure out where you want to start the neck. If you want your neck to start out here, how to figure that out, versus if you want your neck to start up here. In Ann Budd's book, she just has one starting point. It seems to be kind of out by here, but I tell you how to figure it out, and how to figure out how deep your yoke's going to be, and how to figure out the stitches and the rows. So then you'll know how you can plug in your designs. Bonnie Davis says, I don't usually wear pullovers, but decided I would like a summer yoke sweater. You can, and she wants to know about sleeve length. You can make the sleeves any length. They can be little cap sleeves if you want, be really cute, or they can be a short sleeve, sleeve down here, 3/4, any length you want. We'll be talking about all the sleeve lengths when we get to that portion. That's a great question. Claudia Rivera says, is it okay to swatch on DPNs? I'm making a pullover and don't really like magic loop and haven't tried 2 circulars. You can swatch on DPNs, yes. Carol Corcoran, knitting steek method is what by was talking about. I'm not sure. I don't get that. I'm sorry. Sometimes my brain just shuts off. Okay. Comment, Marlene Kern. I used to think that I was a fairly good knitter. Then I found you, Suzanne. I've learned so much. Well, hopefully you're a much better knitter now. I'm still learning too. I practice all the time. It's called knitting. Anne Tremolier's question: does the yoke can carry on after the armpit? Is there a problem of? Okay. You can't really carry the yoke on past the armpit, but you can carry on the pattern past the armpit. Okay, the yoke will end at the armpit because you have to divide off for the arms at that point, just like we divided off for the raglan sleeves. So the portion above the division line for the sleeves is the actual yoke. But the design that you use can certainly extend down the sweater and or the sleeves. When I did my Master Hand Knitting sweater, it was Fair Isle and it was bottom up, but I had a pattern that came up and then it turned into a yoke, and you really can't see where it turned into the yoke. It just merges up towards the top, and that was what I wanted to achieve. So it is a yoke, but you would never know by looking at it. Okay, that was a great question. And Pat Valenzano says, thank you for introducing Arenda Holladay to me. I had heard of TKGA, but had not looked into joining. I have now become a member and I'm looking forward to expanding my knowledge base. I would like it if every single one of you joined TKGA, because it is at this point really a grassroots organization. They started from scratch when they broke off from the company that was managing them. So they are all volunteers. No one gets paid. The money that comes in for your dues is used for the online, providing the web page, providing yarn for the designers and stuff like that. So the more members they have and the more money that comes in, the more expanded the educational portion can be. So it's best thing that ever happened to me was finding TKGA and going through the Master Handknitting Program. So any other questions? We're a little bit over an hour, just right. It always ends right about an hour. Isn't that amazing? Let me see if there's any more questions. I have two computers here. I see I have you down here too, see? So on the main screen up here, I'm on Google Hangouts and I can't see the chat. So I had to put my other computer down here so that I can look at the chat on here. Okay, Gisan Pijo, she did ask the question on Ravelry, and I did find it. And I think I answered her. Anne says, best things happened to her is finding me. That makes me feel so good. Okay. Yes, and Pamela Matthews says the technical articles on TKG are worth the membership all by themselves. If you're trying to do any research on knitting whatsoever, the TKGA is the best place to go, because I'll tell you that, and I wrote a lot of articles for them when I was involved with the committee. All the articles that I wrote, and I know all the other TKGA Master Handknitting Committee members do the same. I did a ton of research and I documented my research. So all the references that I used are at the ends of the articles. That gives you even more places to look for the information. It's like you see the main picture and then you can go down and go to every single one of those references yourself and read them. And that's really how you become a master knitter. Okay. Let's see. Good night kisses. I think that's a good question. Good night kisses says she has a interactive calculator on her blog. You can go on and try that for figuring out yardage. That's fine. So any other questions? Now, the way this is going to go is I'll be on here again on Sunday at 2 o'clock. Don't forget thumbs up. Thumbs up. 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Sunday, and you will have gotten the ITAG next part will come out Friday noon Pacific Standard Time or thereabouts, and in English and French. You'll have plenty of time to look through it, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions. So that's a good time to jump back on Sunday, 2 o'clock, Sunday, 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I won't have any guest interviewees, and so we can focus totally on the ITAG and the questions that you have. Then I will be having more interviewees. I have several lined up. Beth Brown-Renzel has agreed to be interviewed, and so has Benjamin Levesey. Benjamin Levesey is the CEO of Knitters Magazine and XRX Corporation. So he's going to be great to interview. And if you guys think of anybody else that you would like me to interview, just make the suggestion and I can contact them. I have yet to contact Ann Budd, but I'm going to be doing that soon. I wanted to get a few sessions of interviewing on here first so that I can show them what the process is and I can have something to say, this is how it will go. And so now I have Charles and Arenda. So any other questions? Anybody have any other questions? Okay, that's it. I'll let you go and you can get back to your knitting, and I'll see you next time. Happy knitting.